As we wind down the busy leasing season and that student turn and begin that hard work of budget season, I thought we'd talk all about how to find equilibrium and strategies for sustainable workloads. So coming up, That's My Job guest is Jason Kae, and he'll be joining the conversation. He has dedicated his career to crafting thriving team cultures for mutual success. With a focus on multifamily real estate since 2005, he's held various roles, accumulating in the Director of Leasing and Development, and currently the Director of Onboarding and Enablement. He leads a global team and recently authored a book called Journey to the Rainforest Team Culture, which emphasizes employee satisfaction and engagement. And I'm really excited to introduce you not only to Jason, but also to this book. It is absolutely fabulous. But before we do, it's time for the Ready, Set, Respond polls. We want to hear from you, our audience, so please participate. Pull out your phones, scan that QR code on your screen, or I also put the link in the chat of the GoToMeeting, or you can go directly to slido.com and enter that code 3487231. Now, keep in mind, like always, there are no right or wrong answers to these polls. There are just honest ones. So when you see the poll on the screen, be ready to respond with your feedback. All right, let's get started. Okay, first Ready, Set, Respond poll. Have you ever been part of a team that struggled with toxic work culture? The options are yes, no, or not sure. So far, we've got 7 people who have participated, and all of them have said yes. Oh my gosh. 8 people, still 100% yes. 9 people, still 100% yes. This does not make me happy, but it does sound like there is a lot. 11 people, still 100% yes. Yep, it sounds like there's a lot of toxic work cultures out there. All right, let's keep going. Let's go to our next poll. 12 people, still 100% yes. Okay, I think point has been made. All right, that next poll, let's talk. How often do you find it challenging to manage your workload effectively? So very often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Okay, 9 people, 10 people already, 11 people in. We've got 45, 54 saying sometimes, 31% saying very often, 20% saying rarely, 15% people weighing or 15 people weighing in, and no one said never. So at some point, we're all facing some kind of challenge with managing that workload effectively. Good to know. Okay, our last poll. Let's find out. Have you ever experienced burnout due to an overwhelming workload? The answers to choose from are yes, more than once, yes, once, or no, never. We got 7 people, 9 people in, all saying yes, more than once. Again, I'm not happy about this. But it does. 12 people also 100% more than once. Oop, 92%. One person said no, never. Good for you. Wonderful. 92, 93% saying yes more than once, 14 people weighing in. So it does. It sounds like toxic work cultures and managing our workload still tends to be an issue that we are faced with. And I think it's a good time now for us to bring out Jason. Jason, welcome to the program.
Hey, Carla, super happy to be here.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this conversation because, as you know, I've been reading your book, Journey to a Rainforest Team Culture, and we've had a couple of conversations about it. And I'm just so excited to introduce you to our guests because this book, I mean, if I had this when I was a brand new property manager, I think things might have been very different for me in some of these situations. And so I wanted, to just start the program, we're definitely going to get into some tips around managing our workload, but I really wanted to introduce our guests to your book. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so Journey to a Rainforest Team Culture follows the story of Eliza Hawkins, who is a property manager starting a new job with a new property management company. And she is managing the largest asset she's ever managed. I think a couple hundred units was her largest assets, and now it's close to 800 units. And she
Mhm.
goes in, as any new manager does, ready to take on the world. The asset is underperforming. The previous manager kind of let things slip, and they're missing occupancy and budgeted target numbers. And so she's brought in to turn it around. And very quickly, she realizes she has inherited a very toxic team culture. And so quickly, she turns to her mentor and former regional manager, where she is introduced to the ecosystem team culture framework, and
Mhm.
begins her journey to the
So
Rainforest Team Culture.
most leadership books that I have read, they read more like an instruction manual, like a
Yeah,
guide.
yeah.
This is a story. And I really wanted to ask, what inspired you to write this book in this way?
So I wanted to write a book that I would enjoy reading. And I've always been a storyteller throughout all of my life. A little nugget of information about me in my 20s. I used to produce and direct stage plays for theater. And so
Oh,
I've always been involved in storytelling in some manner. And so it seemed a natural way to express the leadership framework that I had created. And also for me, narratives are just more fun to follow. People get
hmm,
sucked into fictional stories and they get invested with the characters. And I really wanted the reader to feel like they were in Eliza's shoes and that they go
yes,
through this experience either with her or as her. But
absolutely.
I also knew that there needed to be some practical application to the book, which is why I put call to action sections at the end of each chapter. And that's where the reader is invited to reflect on the lessons of the chapter and really start to analyze and assess their own leadership and their own team
Mhm.
culture.
I love that part about the book. Yeah, I noticed that. I'm actually listening to the audio version, and whoever recorded the audio, she did such a great job bringing all the individual characters to life. Every time she reads a section for Rachel, it's like nails on a chalkboard. I'm like, oh, it's Rachel again. But
It's Grayson Heil is her name, and she did a fantastic job. She's an actor out of LA. And when I decided to do an audio version of the book, it was important to me because people said, "Well, why didn't you read it?" And I said, "Well, the book is a female lead, and it was important to me that the voice of the character was a female. And so I
yeah.
decided to not read it, and I hired someone to do it, and she did an amazing job."
She really did. She really did. And yeah, at the end of every chapter, there are those takeaways and those reflections. And it's those reflections. I think if I had had this book when I was a young manager, that would have really cemented some of these concepts and ideas so that I can manifest them in real time when faced with them on site. And let me tell you, I faced almost everything I have read so far. I have faced these challenges on site. So again, Eliza is just the embodiment of this wonderful leader who has the patience and the foresight and the advice that you're basically teaching the readers to create this environment. So speaking of this environment, this ecosystem, that you came up with this analogy, right? So I
Mhm.
think it was at the end of the first chapter, Eliza had met her team. She knew she was, she had a lot on her plate. So she went out to dinner with her mentor, and her mentor starts to, discuss this analogy between the team environment and Earth's environments. Could you
Yes.
expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So, Earth's ecosystems are defined by two pivotal metrics, and those are rainfall and annual average temperature. And so if you think about some of the most well-known ecosystem, a frozen tundra, right, has very low rainfall and very low temperature. A desert has very high temperature, but very low rainfall. And then, of course, a rainforest has high both rain and temperature all year long. So there's a direct correlation between those two pivotal metrics in Earth's ecosystems and team cultures. And team cultures' two pivotal metrics are employee satisfaction and employee engagement. And when you correlate temperature to satisfaction and rainfall to engagement, you start to see how those play into each other and influence each other. Now, when you look at an ecosystem grid, what you'll see is that there are no ecosystems that have high levels of rainfall and low levels of temperature. They don't exist. It's not possible. And so when you think about your team culture, that tracks directly. You can't have a team culture that's highly engaged but has low satisfaction levels. It's not possible. Satisfaction is the foundation and the gateway to starting to foster engagement. And a lot of times as managers, we're not taught that foundation. We're not taught that relationship between those two and how to leverage one to maximize the other.
Well, this is a great book. I highly recommend if you are, part of a team, if your aspirations are to be a team leader, especially in the multifamily space, give it a listen or read the paper version. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. To pivot, I really liked, okay, so chapter 2 is about tone.
Yep.
And Eliza's first team meeting, she gets the team together and she talks about how everyone is using the word busy as like a sort of status symbol, but how being busy and always telling people I'm so busy, I can't do this because I'm too busy doing that, that busyness isn't necessarily a badge of honor. That when other people perceive that, it's more about, well, maybe you don't have good time management or maybe you're complaining, right? So
Yeah.
I really liked that conversation about being busy and how she pivoted that to, fostering more cooperation. So given this, how do we transition from, a constant state of busyness, right? Because we
Yeah.
know there's a never ending list of to-do things when we work on site. I mean, if all the work orders done and all the move-ins are done, there's preventative maintenance, there's, nurturing touch points, events, there's all sorts of things we can always be getting to. So how do we transition from that constant state of busyness to more of an engaged state and a productive state? Can you share a few of those insights with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There is always something to do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so this can be a really challenging one. Employees are in the multifamily industry and really across all industries, they're constantly being asked to do more and more and more. So the idea of, going back to that idea of avoiding the word busy, it's not so much about the word itself, right? But it's more about the intention behind it. There's this negativity or frustration behind it that can ultimately lead to potentially a more toxic team environment, or it could damage relationships you have within your team. The story of Eliza in there is that she's told a story about how she wore the term busy as this moniker of her ability to do all these things. But in reality, people looked at her and said, well, if she's so overwhelmed and busy, does she not manage her time well? Does she not know how to do her job well, that she's constantly feeling overwhelmed? So it could have a negative side effect as well. It's more about the intention behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if you shift away from that state of mind to one of maybe more like realistic optimism or realistic determination, that's what I've always found to work. You want to acknowledge what's going on and that there are a lot of things to accomplish, but then you want to focus on how you can be effective and be efficient in order to get those things done to meet the goals and objectives and deadlines that all of us have to meet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so for the individual contributors,
Yeah.
when they're trying to, assess, what are some tips for them?
Okay.
Where
So
do they start?
individual contributors. I've always stressed that clarifying the tasks that you're being asked to accomplish is a good place to start. When you're given something specific to do, you want to repeat that back to your manager so that they hear it back in your own words, clarifying what they've asked of you, the goals, the objectives, the deliverables. That helps you align immediately. Also, I would recommend inquiring about timelines. When are you expected to deliver this? And then set expectations as an individual contributor up front. Let them know I will or will not be able to hit that deadline, but I could do it by this date, or I can deliver a portion by this time, but I would need until here to deliver the rest. And so as an individual contributor, you get a hand on the wheel and you feel a little more stability in the task that you're being asked.
Or I have A, B, and C already on the schedule. You're
Yep.
adding in D. Which one's the priority?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And two, you want to make sure, and to the second point around aligning on deadlines, you've got to align on a deadline. You have to understand when your leader is expecting you to deliver things, and this helps you understand urgency. And then that leads into the last part that as an individual contributor, personally, I've always found it effective to give incremental updates. You want to share what you've done as you reach certain milestones within your task. And this does a couple of things. It not only allows you to stay aligned with the expectations of your leader on what the deliverables are to look like, but it also helps you keep this task on their radar. And we've all been on those teams or had those leaders, right, who assign us things, and then we go off into the woods and we create everything and we come back and we say, hey, here's what I did. And they go, oh, you know what? I forgot you were working on that. I don't actually need that anymore. Or actually, we need this now, right?
That's very deflating, right?
Yeah, it's traumatizing to people
Yes,
when they go
yes.
and put all that effort and then it's for nothing essentially.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
giving those milestone updates helps you stay aligned, but also helps you stay on that leader's radar.
And then you said something about that we need to, as individual contributors, manage our energy.
Yes, this is huge for me lately. Um, I used to think that I had bad time management, but what I found out is I have bad energy management. And when I focused on that instead, things started to shift for me. Um, People think that it's time management, and that might be true, but energy management, it's where it's at. And what I mean by this is, so if you're going to work on a task and your job allows it, again, this is if your job allows it, so don't go breaking any rules or getting yourself in trouble, you should shut everything else down. Give yourself a solid 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever you can, and completely focus on what you are trying to get accomplished. You don't want to get pings from your phone, from your email, from any other messaging devices internally. And again, I understand that if it's not possible, you have to do what you have to do. But I remember as a property manager, I would be able to go to the leasing office and say, hey, everyone, I need to work on this report. I'm going to be heads down for the next 60 minutes. Unless there's fire, flood, or blood, please wait until I'm done. Um,
Yes.
and that would help me get through it. And if you're an individual contributor, there may be an opportunity for you to go to your leader and say, I want to dedicate X amount of time to work on this. Would it be okay if I turn off my notices? Or if you're on site, if I went into the conference room and I heads down, really put some effort into this. And you'd be
Hmm.
surprised. A lot of leaders want you to accomplish these things, so they can be very accommodating.
Yes. And if you're a leader, what should leaders do when they're, because I remember, being in a corporate environment, there are
Yeah,
so many people that have all these initiatives and all of these asks, and it seemed to just always trickle down.
yeah.
And I don't know if they all realized how many asks were going down to a very small group of individuals. So, as a leader, how do we make sure that we're not overwhelming our teams?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one because as you said, it does roll downhill. But the community manager specifically is kind of that filter between corporate and their on-site teams, right? So communication is always the key, and communication both ways. You have to understand what is on your team's plate, and you do that by constant check-ins, one-on-ones, team meetings, asking for incremental updates, but then you can turn around and do the same thing and manage up. You can provide those updates to your leader. Get your one-on-ones with your leader to let them know what your team is working on, where their bandwidth is at, what the focus is, right? So that manager, that frontline manager can act both as leader and individual contributor. And this is going to help you, or at least, again, I'll speak from my own experience, it's helped me in the past keep a lot of plates spinning at once, which you're asked to do all the time.
Hmm.
And if you're not communicating and not getting those updates, you're potentially overloading them. If you're just taking what corporate hands to you and then handing it down to your team without any kind of assessment or understanding of what your team's bandwidth is, or what this impacts, or what you need to reprioritize, you're potentially setting your team up to be overloaded.
Yeah, absolutely. So, why is it important to take these tips seriously and implement them into our daily workflows and routines?
Oh my gosh. Well, to not take them seriously is to set yourself up long term for failure. Um, when you ignore the emotions and bandwidth of your team, ultimately your culture will break down. And the number one job, in my opinion, of every leader is to sustain high levels of customer or of employee satisfaction and employee engagement. And it's through that that you get most of your work done. And I see you have the quiet quitting slide up. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this is it's kind of a triggering word for me, quiet quitting. And the reason it frustrates me is because the term, it puts all of the responsibility of the situation on the employee. And if someone's in a state of quiet quitting, I'm going to guess that there are factors that ultimately led to that status, right? Like you talked about, leaders who ignore bandwidth or ignore people who are on the verge of burnout. And people want to be valued, they want to contribute. And so when you see someone who's quote unquote quiet quitting, maybe they're just trying to establish healthy boundaries within the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, go ahead.
I wanted to say about establishing healthy boundaries. In your book,
Yeah,
there was a situation where Rachel
yeah,
was demanding that a coworker stay late after work to clean 3 units that she had leased late that afternoon, and had quick turnarounds, and they were moving in the next day.
yeah,
Um, and I was so impressed with, I think it was the housekeeper. She basically was like, I cannot stay late. And she had some very personal reasons.
yeah,
And she put up that boundary and she said, uh, no. And obviously Rachel didn't like that, but I loved how Eliza, I loved how Eliza handled that. But it dawned on me how the housekeeper was really maintaining those professional, and it was not uh her being unreasonable or anything. It was a healthy boundary for her. And she's like, I pick up my children after work at this time, and when I cannot make it, I'm fined.
yeah,
And these are my hours, and this is the system, and this is when if you should have radioed me. you
yeah.
know there were the process wasn't followed, and Eliza handled that wonderfully. But again, that was an example, I think, of creating healthy boundaries at work.
Yeah, it's so important to do that. And you know, when we have the ability to honestly communicate within our team, we get a lot more of those types of conversations that Eliza had with that housekeeper about
Hmm.
what she could or couldn't do or was willing to do or not willing to do. And so setting those type of environments where honest communication can happen leads to more of that sharing. When
Yes.
they're not, people just shoulder it or they're quiet about it, and then they just set those boundaries without telling you. And that could give you the impression as a leader that they're not participating in a way that you want, or they're not going above and beyond how you think they should go. They're not meeting your expectations as a leader, but maybe your expectations aren't completely realistic.
Yeah, maybe they're not in alignment.
Yeah,
Well,
you and I talked about earlier before this call about the idea of having a team full of everyone going above and beyond, right? And I use the
yeah.
analogy of the 1990s Chicago Bulls for people who are basketball fans. You can't have a team full of Michael Jordans. You've got to have people who are willing to play defense, pass the ball to Michael, put in their minutes. And if you expect to have a team full of Michael Jordans, that's a lot to handle. You know, you
Yeah.
want your few above and beyond, your few high potentials, and it's okay to have people who want to just show up and do their job. It doesn't mean they're not moving the needle on your goals. People who show up and just do their job are still contributing to your organization.
Hmm. You know, they're the ones you can rely on and depend on. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, I think there are so many, you know, parallels between journey to a team for a rainforest team culture and, you know, balancing your workloads. I highly recommend everyone, you know, take a listen or, you know, read the book. I think you'll enjoy it as much as I have. And so we have reached that time where it's time for us to play a game. Jason, we're going to play a
Sweet.
game. It's called Fact or Fiction, and I'm going to read you three short statements
Okay.
about burnout.
Okay.
These are all about burnout, and you're going to need to tell me if the statement is fact or if it's fiction. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready to play.
All right, and audience, you go ahead and play along with us. Go ahead and scan that QR code. We'll get ready. We've got three statements coming up. Okay. All right, our first statement, the World Health Organization officially classified burnout as a medical diagnosis, including the condition in the International Classification of Diseases. Is this fact or is this fiction?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Officially classified burnout. I'm going to say fact because it actually does influence your physical health.
Yeah, it is. In fact, they classify it as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. They say burnout can be diagnosed by four symptoms: a feeling of energy depletion, exhaustion, and fatigue, an increased mental distance from your job, feelings of negativism and cynicism relating to your job, and reduced professional efficacy. Let's see how yep, our audience also 80% said fact, and they were right.
That's
All right.
incredible.
Yep. Our next statement, remote workers experience less burnout compared to their in-person counterparts.
We'll experience less burnout. Um, I I feel like this might be a trick question because you think, oh, I'm remote workers, but I remember when we went into the pandemic that I was actually more stressed working from home because there was no commute anymore. My commute to and from work was replaced by being on meetings and doing projects. And so I would say that no, when you're at home, you actually work maybe longer hours or at least more hours. And so I would say that is
That's fiction.
a fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. It is. It's fiction. Uh, the truth is that remote workers experience more burnout than their in-person counterparts, with hybrid workers being right in the middle. And again, that's because, especially when you are in a rainforest team culture, you're working together, and that's actually a stress reliever, right? You're having that constant communication, cooperation, collaboration and reinforcement environment where when you're at home, you're not interacting, you're left with all of your ants. We had this wonderful emotional intelligence trainer on a couple episodes ago where she talked about those negative thoughts that get into our brain. She called them ants, and your ants just go wild when you're all by yourself. So
Oh my gosh.
absolutely. And uh our audience, all right, on with you. Great job, guys. Our last statement, according to a 2023 survey by Future Forum, burnout is still on the rise.
I would say with all of the conversations and podcasts and LinkedIn posts I've seen, I would say that is a fact.
That is a fact. Absolutely. They actually determined through their survey, and I think they surveyed over 10,000 desk workers in the US, that in 2023, 41% of the US desk workers reported burnout, which was a slight uptick, 2% rise from the all time high that they had in May of 2021 when the survey started. And our audience right there with us. Great job, guys. I'm sorry there is so much burnout, but hopefully today we've given you a few things to think about for our leaders out there. Make sure you're keeping that communication open, have those one-on-ones, do those team meetings, balance that workload, find out where your skills are. And then for those individual contributors, make sure you're paraphrasing, you understand, you're clear on what's expected, and that you're vocalizing when you need help. So if you do have a lot on your plate, especially those overachievers, right? I think we talked about the yes people. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, I could do that. The question isn't, can you do it? The question is, should you do it? Um,
I love
and,
that.
and do you have the right amount of time and resources to prioritize that work-life balance? So guys, this QR code is going to take you to Jason's LinkedIn page. He's constantly posting leadership tips and quips and tidbits that I personally find valuable. I highly recommend you follow him as well. And Jason, thank you so much for being on our show today. We really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, Carla. I'm glad that we got to meet. And anytime you want to have a conversation, I am up for it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to call you as soon as I finish that last chapter.
Perfect.
Absolutely. So guys, now it's time for you to head on over to that Facebook or our Satisfax page on Instagram and add your favorite takeaway from today's program for that chance to win a $50 gift card. The deadline is 5 p.m. Pacific tonight, and our judges are standing by. And also, don't forget to register for our next conversation. You go to satisfax.com/webinars. We're going to be talking all about staying powers, how to maximize resident engagement after the move-in with Maria Petraforte. She's a wonderful person. She's just full of energy. She's a multifamily consultant and an NAAEI faculty member. I think you're going to really enjoy meeting Maria. As you guys know, all good things must come to an end, and we've reached the end of our program. So do me a favor and help our program improve by completing that closing survey before you log off. Your feedback is important to me. So thank you for joining the conversation today. I'm Carla Alicea. We'll see you next time.